Hello and welcome to my spoiler talk for A Plague Tale: Innocence. Yes, this is where we can talk about anything and everything when it comes to A Plague Tale: Innocence, so that you know what that means. Spoiler warning is in effect. If you do not want this game spoiled for you, go play the game. Then come on back. Now, if you do want a spoiler-free review of the game, I do have that on this channel, so check that out. I will put that link in the video description below. Feel free to check that out if you want to do so. But if you do not want this game spoiled for you, I recommend you go play this game because it is a good game. And then come on back because there is a lot to talk about and some interesting things to talk about. Now, I know we will not have time to talk about everything when it comes to A Plague Tale: Innocence, but that does not mean we don't have to talk about it. If I don't have a chance to speak about it, we can talk about it in the comments below. So if we don't get a chance to talk about it in the video, feel free to bring it up in the comments below and we will definitely have that conversation. To get right away to where we're going, literally from the very beginning, I always thought Hugo and his headaches when it come to the rats, that somehow there was some kind of connection there. Like in the beginning, you always could tell due to the fact that there was always some kind of, there was some kind of headache he was getting when the rats came into play. And so I was like, okay, there's got to be some involvement with the rats and Hugo here. And what is it? I was trying to figure it out. And also the other one you could tell that was connected to his illness is when they made the cure, when Alicia made the cure and they were about to leave with it, and all of a sudden the rats stopped attacking once the cure was made. And not a cure, but the medicine to help him get better and stop the process sooner than later. But I truly did not expect, though, that and it was a great surprise to me, that him having the ability to control the rats was going to be that thing. I think it was fresh. I loved it. I think it was great. And I think it was a new way to change up the gameplay. And when I talked about in my non-spoiler review where I mentioned that, the second act was a little bit of a lull for me, and I felt like the third act really picked it up and made me way more interested beyond belief and really saved for me the story of the game. The third act was so good. This is where it started to happen. This chapter with Hugo going through the university was that chapter that from there on, that set up a great third act that I absolutely was amazed by, and I loved it, and it hooked me narratively, and we'll talk more about it soon. But I do like the mechanic overall of controlling the rats, and it just kept it fresh and fun. But I do have to talk about that because I talked about in my non-spoiler review, there was a moment where there was a mechanic that was near the end of the game that got introduced that I felt like, because the way they taught it to you, I felt like I didn't understand it all the way, which was really interesting, and it stood out because the rest of the mechanics, when they teach you different tools, it was really easy to catch and to be able to understand, and the way they explained it really worked. Where here it didn't make sense when it happened, and this is the mechanic of the rats. Now, not when Hugo was only controlling the rats. This is when the second to last chapter, chapter 16, when you're going to the university to to save your mom. That when Alicia is controlling Hugo in regards to telling him where she needs the rats to go, I was not understanding the rules and how that all worked, and I was trying to figure it out for the longest time, but I had to do a lot of trial and error, and then I finally figured it out and figured out kind of what I think the rules were. But it was just really frustrating because they did so well about explaining all the other mechanics that I was like, how is this one so different in regards to trying to explain it, that stood out, that I don't understand how this works. Or they explained it, but it didn't really capture exactly what I was trying to understand for the mechanic of the rats. But I think they could have done a little bit better in explaining in that method. Now, I also did talk about in my non-spoiler review where there was a moment in the game where I was like, oh yes, this is where I get to use all the tools in my toolbox, where I'm going to have to be really challenged in this end of this game to be able to use all the tools that I've learned, and really, instead of using one or two tools to take out your enemies or to get past them, that you're using because you have you probably have 8 different tools you can use. So I was thinking more of using 4 to 5 different ones within a level, and just being really more creative and really more challenging in that aspect. And this was the level, chapter 16, where you travel from the traveled to the university to take on Valentius. And I just thought this would be the part where we do get challenged, and unfortunately that didn't happen, and I wish that they did that because I think it would have been so much better leading up to that. But to be honest, it was all worth it. To do the rat battle with Valentius was excellent. It was super fun and exciting, and I think the other part was the rat mechanic really got to see its full potential, and it really was enjoyable to play. And I think I put this one as one of my favorite final boss battles in quite some time that I've played. That just was so unique, and it was not only fun to play, visually, like narratively, everything just worked in that moment, and it just all worked great. Like just seeing visually their mechanic of the rats and how that works, but on top of that, the point where the rats, where you have the group of white rats and the group of black rats, and it's literally like a wave of rats going at each other, and it's just such a visual. It's so visually nice to watch, and it's just really interesting overall. And I just thought it was great. I loved that battle, and I think that really put the icing on the cake for that third act and really made it what it is. But when we got to the end of the third act, that's where my mind was like, wow, this is great. And it is the moment that really captivated me and really sold me on, I want to see another game. I want to see them explore these concepts. And it was the moment that there was a stare between Hugo and Valentius when Valentius was dying and Hugo was being hugged by his loved ones. There was a stare that they had between each other. They looked at each other in the eyes. And the weird, not the weird part, but the interesting part was, it made me think of if Hugo was maybe looking at his future and like looking at his future self, and just the way he was staring at him, it seemed like he was thinking and being like, is this going to be me? Because we're similar. Like he has the same ability that I do. Is this going to be my fate, that I'm going to die and someone is going to watch me like I watched him die? And it was just really captivating, and where it really put the nail on the coffin for me in regards to hammer on the head, more I should say, that it really hit me was the next chapter at the very end, where it's talked about Alicia was talking to Hugo, and Hugo was like, why did Melly leave? And Alicia was like, oh, she just left because she had to go do other things at the moment. But you could really tell that throughout the chapter before that, when they're leading up to get to the university, that Melly was afraid of Hugo and who he was and what he was, and not understanding who he really is, and that, you know, he's still himself. He just happens to have these abilities. And so you could tell that Hugo didn't buy it. And I could tell that because of the way they sold it in chapter 16 when they're traveling to the university, with Melly literally saying out loud with Hugo next to her, talking about how scary he is with all these powers and how horrible this is. And, you know, even though that he's on their side, she didn't like that. And kids are great listeners. Kids are probably the best listeners in the room, and people just don't know it, especially when it involves nonverbal cues and words specifically that come out of people's mouths and how they interpret them. And I just think this was a perfect setup in regards to something that they could explore in the future of, like, Hugo is he going to have to deal with the power that he has, and what the cost is of the people around him? Is he going to lose people? And is he going to deal with the concept of, you know, trying not to be like Valentius and not make the same mistakes he did, so that he doesn't suffer the same fate? But maybe in the process of not doing that, does he end up becoming what he didn't want to become, which was Valentius? So it was just super interesting, and I think that's a great concept to explore, and they fed it perfectly at the end of the game. And I was just like, oh my gosh, I love this concept. Let's explore it. And we'll talk about more soon in regards to why I think this concept will really work, even though obviously it's a trope that some stories utilize. But I think there's a couple tweaks in the story that I think will make it different and much more interesting than just the classical trope that's used in this game. Now, I talked about in my spoiler-free review that there also were a couple character moments that I felt like fell flat, that, I know they were trying to make an impact and I understand what they were trying to do, but just really didn't work for me. And I'm just going to explore the two that I had an issue with. One of them was the death of Arthur. Actually, both of them are deaths. The death of Arthur. I think, honestly, I felt like it was useless because when he died, it really didn't make an impact on me. Obviously, it made an impact on Melly. If that's what they were doing, then it worked in regards to maybe if she comes back later as a character. But I didn't feel the impact, and I don't know how Alicia would feel the impact because we really didn't have an opportunity to do stuff with Arthur. He broke us out of the camp, but then he was captured and he never got set free until later on, and then there wasn't really much time we spent with him. So if they made some moments where they could have included him, like if they included him when they were going to go get the medicine for Hugo, that maybe you would have learned stuff about Arthur throughout that process and understand his relationship with his sister and his motivations, what he cares about, and all those kinds of things, so that when he actually gets stabbed with a sword, you care more. Because I just didn't, and unfortunately, it was unfortunate. But I just there were opportunities, and if that wasn't going to be that, then maybe have Melly die. Like, maybe do that, because that would make more impact because we know that character. We understand her. We see her frustrations. We know a lot more than we do of Arthur, and it just didn't work in that aspect. But again, if she comes back maybe in the next game and she's a different person because of her brother's death, maybe that will change my mind. But at the moment, based off just the story alone, it didn't work in the impact it was supposed to make. The other one was Roderick, and when he was sacrificing to protect you. And I think the issue was more of enemies were rushing at you during this process, and so you weren't really able to experience. And for me, this was my most difficult section. This was the section where I ran into the most issues. This is where I ran into the lock-on issues with getting the headshots, because you had to take them out. And then sometimes I would not be behind the carriage because I'm more focused on trying to get the aiming right. And so I did that level like 5 times. I'm usually decently good at games, and I don't usually have to do levels this many times, but there were just too many elements going on. And then they were like saying some stuff like, he's hurt. And I'm like, well, I can't really care at the moment. I have to worry about this. So I just, the emotional payoff just wasn't there. And even when you got to the end, when he actually sitting there dying, it just didn't work. I did like his character. He was nice. He was a decent character. I think he was much more developed than Arthur was as a character. But again, I think I understand what they were trying to do with like having it happen with gameplay going on. I just don't know if it worked right for me, at least. And if it worked right for you, let me know. I'm really interested what you think about that. Now, I do want to talk about the relationship between Hugo and Alicia, because in the very beginning, you can really tell that that Alicia really resented Hugo throughout the very much of the beginning, that she didn't like him, that he was a burden, and that she just didn't care. And you could really tell that. And you could tell what the wedge was. The wedge was the mother. That Alicia never really had a mother, never got to know her mom. Like, the relationship just wasn't there because she was busy taking care of Hugo. And, Alicia was just pushed to the side. And so you can really tell that their relationship was so strenuous in the beginning because of the mom. And so it was just really interesting. And on top of that, with the time period that they're in, most of the time you learn your roles from your same-sexed parents. So like Hugo should be learning male things from his father right at that moment, but Alicia's learning from her father, where Hugo's learning from the mother, and it's role reversed. And it's very interesting because of that time period. It just makes it even more interesting in those regards. So it was just really interesting to see that how that she's supposed to be learning those things from her mom, and she's not getting that. And so I can understand her frustrations, and you can really see that in the relationship as the wedge in between them in the very beginning. And it doesn't really have a wedge anymore for the end of the game, but it really was there in the beginning. You could really tell that wedge was there. And I think the reason why I'm bringing this up is because on top of that, I don't usually fall for classic tropes in storytelling, but this one did get me. I really did think the mom was dead. And the fact that she was alive, I actually love that she's alive in this story. I do. And I think it was a really nice surprise in my aspect. And, even better, I like that she's alive at the very end of the game. And I like it because of the dynamic of the three characters. So when I talked about the wedge issue between Alicia and Hugo, where Alicia blames Hugo for not having a relationship with her mom and her mom really caring about Hugo, there's an interesting dynamic between those three. And now on top of that, Hugo has abilities where people fear him, and he's starting to understand that. And so now he's starting to realize who he is, what he is, and trying to create himself and not become like Valentius. And there's just so much dynamics between the three. If it was between the two, it would have been an okay story, but I think it's much more interesting having the mother alive, where sometimes in these tropes, and most of the time in these tropes in movies, in storytelling, the mom would be killed at the end of this story, so that the two characters can kind of come together once again over the death of the character. But in this instance, she's alive, and I like that because of the dynamic of the three, that if they make another game, I'm going to be so interested to see how the three characters handle things, because like the mom is want to help Hugo to cure him, but Alicia is gonna really feel that wedge again, and is that going to affect their relationship between the two characters of Hugo and her mother, that something might happen? So there's just so many different dynamics that I just love having all three characters alive. And I would love to see the next game in regards to having these three characters interact and what the story leads to with these three characters. Now, I do want to just throw this little one out there at the moment. And I understand why the game is called A Plague Tale: Innocence. I totally get it. Each word truly has a real meaning in regards to, the story and all the characters and everything like that. I totally understand. But to be honest, they really could have gotten the same impact, or I just think A Plague Tale: Innocence is way too long of a title for a game. Honestly, they maybe should have just called this A Plague Tale, and then maybe they could have added Innocence in the second title. But as being a person that's reviewing this game and it's talking about this game, it's a tongue twister, and it's a lot of work, and it's a lot of characters. So I think they could have done a better job in maybe calling this The Plague or something like that instead. I think there could have been more adjustments they could have made to this title to make it a little bit easier on all of us who are reviewing it and writing about it. And even though I will give them credit, though, again, like all of the parts of A Plague Tale: Innocence do make sense in regards to what the story is and the characters. So I do give it credit that it still stays true to that, and it's not just a long title just to be a long title that has no meaning at all in the story. At least it does all mean something, and it's important. But once I was done with this game, to be honest, I wanted more. I want to know more about the characters, where they're going to go in the story. I want to know what the problems they're going to run into. And I think it was a great introduction to these characters. If they're doing a 2-game story or a 3-game story, this is a great first story. This is a great intro, a beginning to learn about these characters, and then have them really hit their plateau of issues in the second game, and then maybe have them resolved in the third game if they make a trilogy, or just maybe have the more issues in the second game and then get resolved in the second game. But I really love what they have done with these characters, and I love what the story itself, when you look at the overcompassing story, it's a really great first arc of an overall narrative. And I think I had my small issues of characters and story plots in the middle that it fell a little flat for me, and it ended up being a little dull, but it picks up in the third act really, really well. But I really think, pushing those aside, the rest of this game is so good and the story is so good that I'm just so excited to see if they're going to make another one and where they take the plot with this story. So I'm really interested to see that. What do you think of A Plague Tale: Innocence? This is my spoiler talk for it. Let me know in the comments below. And again, we are not going to have time. We didn't have time to talk about everything in regards to A Plague Tale: Innocence. So if you have something that I didn't mention or want to mention something about what we talked about, feel free to tell me in the comments below. I'd love to have that conversation. And if you like this content, check out the rest I have here on the channel. Go ahead and give them a like, share them with your friends. And if you want to keep up with everything I release here on the channel, just hit that subscribe button. So thank you so much for watching. My name is Mitch, and I'm signing off saying, see you soon.